I was meant to become an angel of death. Instead, I became its scrap. They came for us at shift change, when the forge's heat had settled into the bones, and the air tasted like iron filings ground fine enough to breathe. Vox horns cracked over the foundry lines, drowning the hymns of the presses, and the overseers parted like the tide before a black and ivory procession. The iron seraphs did not hurry. Astartes never do. Their silence moved faster than their boots. I stood at my station with tongs locked around a red-white ingot, waiting for the machine spirit's blessing tone to chime before the drop. The tone never came. A gaunt tech chaplain stepped between the anvils, servo limbs lifted like a supplicant's halo, and the entire line fell to a hush built by fear, faith, and smoke. From the furnace, ore, he intoned through a vox grill. From the ore, blade. From the blade, judgment, kneel. We did. The gantry heat rippled across our backs. The chaplain's censer swung, smearing incense over the stink of oil and sweat. Behind him strode two seraphs in dark plate filigreed with wire prayers, helmets cradled beneath their arms, faces like statues that remembered how to breathe. The third wore his helm, his eye lenses turned, and the foundry lights became two small, cold suns. Names were pulled from a data slate by a robed scribe whose flesh gloves trembled. I learned the sound my name could make in another man's mouth, short, sharp, unarguable. The men on either side of me exhaled as if the world had dodged them. The chaplain placed a ferric sigil against my brow, and the metal burned in a way that felt like approval. "You will be measured," he said. "You will be unmade. If you are found worthy, you will be remade." I tried to answer and tasted soot. The seraph with the helmet gave a fractional nod, and I understood that words were wasted on thresholds. We were marched out past the press stacks and the slag lagoons, up through the skeleton of Virelia Prime's Manufactoria, where cables sagged like old prayers. The city above was a continent of chimneys. Its sky was smoke, its rain a fine grit that lived forever in the gums. Pilgrims in rust brown walked the catwalks, counting their steps in Binharic and Latin both, hedging their wagers between two gods who had never disagreed loudly enough to comfort anyone. The monastery sat where the forges met the mountain, half cathedral, half engine, its buttresses bolted into the rock as if daring the planet to shrug. Clean air lived there, and light. I had never minded either until I saw them arranged like ornaments instead of necessities. They took us in through a gate big enough for a god machine's foot, past bas-reliefs scored with glories we were too small to imagine. Servitors in parchment skin shuffled by with data scrolls clutched to their chests. A bell tolled, not to mark time, but to remind it to kneel. We were 10 chosen from our shift. A boy from the smelters, with hands already scarred, as if he'd survived a dozen campaigns. A woman from the molds with shoulders thick as a loader's. A quiet wireman who looked like he'd been born tired and stayed that way. We did not speak. There is a pride that loves company, and a pride that survives without it. We were learning the second kind. The indoctrination hall smelled of ink and solvent. Servo arms scuttled across the ceiling, carrying quills and scalpels in equal measure. A servo skull hovered beside each of us, projecting purity litanies on the wall, gene markers, and thresholds I didn't understand, numbers that would decide if my blood was a hymn or a heresy. A medicae in pale robes swabbed my throat and inside of my cheek. Another took a vial of blood and hustled it into the steel belly of a machine that clicked once and began to hum like a satisfied animal. "Name?" a scribe asked without looking up. I gave it. He wrote it, then crossed it with a line so neat and final I wondered if I'd misheard. "You said, names are for the foundry," he said. "Numbers are for the ledger. You want the ledger." I wanted 100 things and none of them fit in my mouth. They weighed us. They measured the width of wrists and the bark of lungs. They mapped bones with humming wands and frowned at scars to see if they'd learned anything. A chaplain lay sister led us to a font and smeared each face with oil that smelled faintly of ozone. "The Emperor knows," she whispered to each brow in turn. She did not say what he knew, which felt like the kindest thing anyone had done for us that day. Night on Virelia is a rumor. The monastery manufactured its own, shutting the skylights, dimming the lamps, letting the forge light become a heartbeat you noticed only when it stopped. They bedded us in a chamber of stone bunks, each with a thin blanket that smelled like soap boiled too long. I lay on my back and counted the scratches in the ceiling until the numbers turned to breaths. A vision found me at the edge of sleep. Not a dream too clean for that. A corridor of white, a lamp like a small sun. Hands not rough enough to be human. Somewhere beyond the light, a voice recited serial numbers with the patience of a glacier. I tried to step toward it. The floor rolled like a deck under storm. When I woke, my mouth tasted like copper and shame. At dawn, or what the bells called dawn, the tech chaplain returned with serfs carrying trays of food that was not rations. Fresh bread. A thin broth that smelled of herbs instead of chemicals. The luxury made the room quieter. We ate without looking at one another, as if somehow seeing the hunger would break it. Today, the chaplain said, we test obedience. He did not explain why obedience came before strength. The seraphs in attendance did not explain why they watched us so closely as the doors opened and heat rolled in like a living thing. They led us down into the undercrypts where the dead monastery's foundations were bolted into the mountain. The heat there did not radiate, it pressed. A row of iron braziers glowed white and made the air a chewable thing. We were given tongs and told to move ingots from one brazier to another while reciting the catechism of steel without falter or pause. The chaplain moved among us, counting not ingots, not words, something else. When my grip slipped and an ingot fell, the seraph's helm turned. Not a rebuke, not yet. A reminder that gravity is always working and the ground is always hungry. By the time the bell tolled release, my lungs scraped like files and my arms shook in a way that did not belong to me. The chaplain nodded once. Tomorrow we test endurance, he said. If the Emperor wills it. I did not know yet what the Emperor willed. I only knew I wanted to be the kind of metal that didn't bend before the hammer remembered its name. The heat in the undercrypts did not fade after the test. It followed us back to our bunks like a second skin. We lay in silence, blistered hands on our chests, the forge's breath still trapped inside our lungs. No one complained, no one dared. Somewhere above, the bells tolled for Compline, and the echo came down the vents like a sermon spoken by the mountain itself. Sleep came in fits. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the ingot slip, the seraph's helmet tilt toward me, the faintest nod of judgment. Each time I woke, I found my hands clenched around the blanket, as if still holding tongs. The skin of my palms cracked when I opened them. At dawn, the tech chaplain returned, flanked by servo arms bearing vials of a milky solution. The flesh must be tempered, he said. We drank. It tasted like burnt bone and lightning. My throat seized, then the pain vanished, replaced by a numbing cold that spread through the veins like frost creeping through iron. We were marched again, not to the forges this time but upward, into the monastery's spinal corridors. The walls were carved with reliefs of warriors, kneeling before robed figures, who held their skulls in one hand and torches in the other. The chaplain's censer hissed as it swung, spilling smoke that smelled of incense and solvent. He stopped before a door rimmed with red runes. Here, he said, we separate conviction from endurance. The room beyond was circular, the floor a lattice of metal grids glowing faintly. A dozen cables hung from the ceiling like the roots of a dead tree. Each ended in a hooked node. One by one, we were tethered. The nodes pressed to our spines, the chill of contact worse than the heat we'd left behind. The chaplain touched a rune. Pain followed clean, bright, all-consuming. Recite, he commanded. I tried. The words of the catechism of steel dissolved in the surge that tore through my nerves. Beside me, someone screamed the Emperor's name until his voice cracked. The smell of seared skin filled the room. When the current ceased, the silence was a vacuum. I tasted copper again, only this time it was mine. The chaplain walked the line, noting whose eyes still tracked him and whose rolled white under the lids. Half will advance, he said. The rest will be reforged. The word reforged landed heavy, but no one asked what it meant. The servo arms detached us. My legs wobbled, but the cold that lived in my veins held me upright. We were led into a narrow corridor where the air felt thick enough to chew. A Medicae serf met us there, his voice thin behind his rebreather. "You will rest," he said. "You will eat. Tomorrow, your measure will be taken in blood." The meal was a paste of protein and grit. It stuck to the tongue and refused to taste of anything. The bunk room smelled of ozone and fear. Someone whispered prayers to the Emperor, another to the Omnicia, and for the first time I understood how easily the two could blend when you were desperate enough. I lay staring at the ceiling again. The cracks looked different now, like veins branching through stone. I thought of the forge's hum, the way it had lingered in the air even after the presses stopped. If the Emperor's will could be metal, maybe that was what it sounded like. When the lights dimmed, I closed my eyes and listened. The hum was still there, faint but insistent, threading through the walls and into the bones, a rhythm older than prayer, steadier than breath. I dreamed of walking through a field of molten glass, each step hardening behind me as I moved. Ahead stood a figure in armor, faceless, waiting. When I reached for him, he raised a hand and pressed it to my chest. Heat flared, and where his fingers touched, something inside me began to crack. I woke, gasping, the taste of iron back in my mouth. Across the room, the boy from the smelters sat upright, staring at the door. "Did you hear it?" he whispered. "Hear what?" "The hum," he said. "It's still calling." I didn't answer, because I had heard it too. The next day began without dawn. The monastery's lamps simply brightened, bleaching the shadows from the walls until the dark surrendered. No one spoke. The silence had learned discipline overnight. We were led to the courtyard where the mountain met the forge. The air outside shimmered with heat that never slept. The stones beneath our feet were black glass. Each step left a print that cooled slower than the heartbeat that made it. Above us, servo cranes moved like slow birds, shifting plates of armor large enough to crush a man without notice. The chaplain waited beside a trough of coolant water, its surface filmed with oil. Behind him, the seraphs stood in a perfect line, statues that had remembered how to breathe. "Endurance," he said, "is the measure of faith." The trough steamed. The air trembled. "You will enter. You will hold until your flesh forgets it is flesh." We obeyed. The liquid bit harder than fire. It stole breath, sight, and sound until only pain remained a single, endless note. My skin screamed first, then stopped as the nerves surrendered. I felt the heat beneath the cold, a paradox my mind could not name. Beside me, the smelter boy's breathing hitched, then vanished. The chaplain's servo arm reached down, pulled him free, laid him on the stone. "Reforging," he murmured. The word carried no malice, only purpose. When my vision steadied, the world seemed smaller, as though pain had burned away the edges. I stepped out when ordered, limbs shaking, skin patterned with red where the oil clung. A serf draped a coarse cloth across my shoulders. It smoked where it touched. "Endurance is not survival," the chaplain said. "It is obedience that refuses to die." We were marched again down this time, deeper than the undercrypts, into the catacombs where the monastery's waste heat turned the air to breathless fog. The walls sweated, rivulets of condensation traced scripture cut into the metal. At intervals, alcoves opened to reveal the unmoving shapes of those who had failed before us. Statues of flesh preserved in glass, veins threaded with copper wire. The chaplain paused before one such alcove. "Each failure teaches," he said. "Each scar sanctifies the next attempt." His hand, heavy with servo metal, rested on my shoulder. "Do you understand, aspirant?" I wanted to say yes. I wanted to mean it. The words crawled out anyway, hoarse and small. "Yes, Father." He nodded, satisfied. "Then you may walk the furnace path." The furnace path was a corridor lined with open vents. The heat poured out in invisible fists, flattening the breath in my chest. We moved through one at a time, each step slower than the last. I heard the hiss of skin, the groan of tendons hardening like wire. Halfway through, the hum returned, the same rhythm I'd felt in the walls, the same pulse that had whispered through my dreams. It filled the air, the floor, my bones. It wasn't a sound anymore, it was inside. When I stumbled at the final vent, the hum surged, lifting me forward. I fell out of the passage onto cool metal and lay there gasping, steam rising from my skin. The chaplain's shadow fell across me. "You hear it," he said, not asking. "I do." "Good. The forge speaks to those it means to keep." That night, back in the bunks, no one prayed aloud. We lay listening to the same distant rhythm, each pretending not to. The boy from the molds whispered finally, "It's not the Emperor's voice, is it?" No one answered. Some lies need silence to stay alive. I closed my eyes and saw again the corridor of my dream, the figure of light waiting beyond. This time, when he raised his hand, the heat that poured from it didn't burn, it fused. When I woke, the skin where his hand had touched was the color of forged brass. The forge was still humming, and beneath it, so was I. They woke us with bells again, but this time there was no light, only the red flicker of lumen coils buried in the walls. The air carried a chemical tang that stripped the throat bare. The chaplain met us in silence. He didn't preach this morning, he inspected. One gloved hand traced the fresh scars on my arm where the oil had burned through the night. The metal fingers left a faint chill that refused to fade. "The flesh remembers," he murmured. "Today we teach it to forget." We were led down through a spiral stairway that descended for what felt like miles. The walls changed as we went, stone to metal, metal to a lattice of cables, pulsing faint blue, as if the monastery itself had veins. At the bottom lay a hall bright enough to hurt a theater of steel tables, mechadendrites coiled like sleeping serpents, Medicae servitors hanging from the ceiling on thick cords. The smell of antiseptic fought the reek of scorched meat. It lost. We were told to strip. The boy from the smelters hesitated only a breath. Hesitation drew eyes. The serf attending him jabbed a needle of tranquilizer into his neck. He went limp and vanished into the cluster of machines. The chaplain spoke above the whine of drills. "The Emperor refines through flame, the Omnissiah through precision. Here both watch." They called it preparation. I called it dissection done politely. Hands bound, spine exposed to the chill of a metal slab. I watched a mechanical limb hover into view, carrying a filament of light so thin it could cut without being seen. They spoke of implants, osmod plates, organ grafts, glandular test vectors. I felt each word as a vibration in the bones before the first incision even touched me. The anesthetics dulled pain but not awareness. It was a deliberate cruelty. They wanted us to witness our unmaking. When the filament touched skin, it sang. The sound crawled into my teeth. My pulse spiked until the monitor's tone turned shrill. A Medicae priest pressed a hand to my chest. "Still yourself," he said. "The body resists only when the soul doubts." I tried to still. I tried to believe. But when the scent of my own burned nerves filled the mask, faith became another sense they were cauterizing. Somewhere beyond my peripheral vision, I heard another aspirant break, first a muffled cry, then the short hum of a shock baton. The hum merged with the forge song in my skull until I could not tell which was real. Hours, perhaps days, bled together. The pain became pattern. The pattern became music. When at last they lifted me, the world tilted. My body moved wrong, too heavy in some places, too light in others. There were stitches under my ribs where new organs slept. My heartbeat had changed. It was slower, deliberate, almost mechanical. They fitted us with gray robes and led us to recovery cells. Each cell was a cube of glass and shadow. The walls pulsed faintly, in time with something unseen. A nutrient line slid into my arm without request. I tried to count breaths. The number kept changing. When the sedative haze thinned, the chaplain's voice came through a vox grill overhead. "You have been measured. Some of you will rise. Some of you will serve differently. All of you are his." The grill clicked off. A moment later, another voice, softer, came from the adjoining cell. "Can you still feel your hands?" I flexed. The fingers obeyed but felt distant, as though borrowed. "Yes." "Then you're lucky," the voice said. "Mine won't stop shaking." We didn't see each other. The glass was opaque. But the sound of him breathing close was proof that not all had failed yet. I slept fitfully. Between dreams, the hum returned louder now, resonant, threading through the new rhythm in my chest. It didn't feel foreign anymore. It felt like acknowledgement. When I woke next, a single phrase pulsed across the cell wall in crimson letters, PHASE2, adaptation. The font was prayer script, not medical code. Below it, smaller words flickered. Those who reject will be recycled. I stared until the letters dimmed. They had not said who would do the rejecting. Phase 2 began with no words, only the hiss of pneumatics and the click of boots on metal. The Medicae servitors filed into the recovery hall and began disconnecting nutrient lines one by one. The moment the line left my arm, the hum in my veins faltered as though something living had been unplugged. We were herded into a chamber brighter than the last, walls lined with tanks where organ growths floated in amniotic gel. Each tank bore a nameplate: Larriman's organ, Osmod plate, Betcher's gland. The air was hot, wet, and smelled faintly of meat and disinfectant. The tech chaplain stood before us, a silhouette framed by the shimmer of holy fluids. "Adaptation," he said, "is the body learning to obey the will of the Emperor. The Emperor does not err, flesh does." He gestured, and the servitors moved. I was guided onto a chair that bit cold through the robe. A needle slid into my neck, and the world became a series of overlapping transparencies. The glow of the tanks, the tremor of my own pulse, the outline of a skull that might have been mine. They implanted the second organ, an experimental filtration gland meant to test compatibility. I felt it crawl behind the ribs, seeking a home it would not find. The pain arrived in waves. Each pulse carried static through the vox lines overhead. Somewhere, someone retched. Somewhere else, someone prayed until the words dissolved into screaming. After the operation, we were left strapped to the chairs. The tech chaplain watched our vitals scroll across a hololithic screen. "Most rejection begins within an hour," he said, as if noting the weather. It took less than that. The first convulsion hit like a forge hammer to the chest. My breath came out black and metallic, flecked with blood that hissed when it struck the floor. The new gland burned, then spasmed. I felt it twist, fighting the body that refused to house it. "Embrace the trial," the chaplain said. "If your body rejects, your soul must not." I clung to that thought, the way a drowning man clings to the rope that will pull him under anyway. My vision blurred. The world reduced to the rhythm of my pulse and the distant hum of machinery. Hours blurred into fever. When the spasm eased, I realized my restraints were gone. The chamber had emptied of others. Only the hum remained, deeper now, almost kind. I tried to sit, and the room tilted light, curving in impossible arcs. The walls breathed with me. Voices whispered from the vents. Not words, exactly patterns. Binary prayer folded over human cadence. 0011 Glory 0101 Service. I understood without understanding, and for the first time, the hum answered when I thought back. "We see you," it said, or maybe I imagined it. "You are not yet complete." The door opened. The chaplain entered, flanked by two servitors. "Survivors will proceed to observation," he said. His lenses focused on me, glinting, like molten glass. "You continue to live. That is sufficient proof of will." I tried to rise. My legs obeyed reluctantly, as if remembering they were mine. The air tasted of ozone. The other aspirants were already gone, either advanced or reclaimed. The walk to the observation wing was silent, but for the drip of coolant. Through a glass partition I glimpsed rows of slabs, bodies draped in white. Some twitched, some didn't. A mechanized arm moved above them, extracting glimmering tubes of genetic material. "Waste not." The chaplain paused before a sealed door. "Rest," he said. "The next phase is communion." When the door closed, the light dimmed to a soft crimson. I sank onto the bunk, shivering though the air was warm. The hum threaded through the vents again, softer now, almost intimate. I whispered before I could stop myself. "Why do you keep me?" The answer came like a pulse through the new veins the grafts had carved. "Because you listen." I did not sleep that night. The pain had faded, but something else had replaced it, a rhythm, steady and patient, echoing deep inside the bones. It was not the Emperor's will. It was something older, something that waited in the machine for men like me to fail just right. The lights in the observation wing never truly went out. They pulsed in slow intervals, like the heartbeat of a thing half alive. Every time the room dimmed, I thought maybe it would stop for good. Every time it brightened, I realized I'd started to hope for that. The graft beneath my ribs throbbed whenever I breathed too deep. Each pulse came with a taste of copper, a reminder that something alien was teaching my blood a new language. Across the room, the boy who'd spoken through the glass before coughed up a thread of black fluid. A servitor drifted over, wiped his mouth with a cloth, recorded a number, and drifted away again. The machines cared more for measurement than mercy. When the door hissed open, the tech chaplain entered with 2 attendants in crimson robes. Their sensors spilled vapor that made my vision shimmer. He studied us like a craftsman appraising cracked blades. "Adaptation," he said, "is not complete until the mind consents. Today, you will see what you must become." They led us one at a time into the adjoining chamber. The floor was mirrored metal, the walls lined with lumen panels displaying anatomical diagrams that shifted as we approached. I stood at the center as the lights dimmed, and a holographic projection bloomed, a towering Astartes form built from data and light. Its outline shimmered gold, too bright to stare at directly. "Perfection," the chaplain intoned. "The Emperor's template. Every cell, every molecule, in service. Do you envy it?" I did. The thing was beautiful in a way that hurt. "Then understand this," he said. "To fail is not to be discarded, it is to be refined." The image shifted. The perfect form dissolved into wireframe, then into pieces, servo arms, augmetics, steel plates. Those who survive rejection serve through another design. The light flickered. In its glare, I saw shapes moving behind the walls, silhouettes of men bolted to machines, their limbs replaced by cables, their mouths locked in silent prayer. For a moment the hum inside me grew louder, merging with the noise of the projectors until I could not tell if it came from the room or my own body. Then the gland under my ribs seized again. I dropped to one knee. The chaplain didn't move to help, he only watched. My vision split. The projection's face leaned close, eyes bright with artificial light. "You were never meant to ascend," a voice whispered. "You were meant to endure." I don't know if it was hallucination or revelation, but I answered aloud, "I understand." The pain receded instantly, leaving only exhaustion. The chaplain nodded, as though I'd passed an exam he hadn't written down. "Good," he said. "The Forge has accepted you." I was escorted back to the cell. The boy from before was gone. A new aspirant occupied his place, unconscious. The nutrient line slid back into my arm. Above me, the crimson letters changed. PHASE 3, Reclamation. I lay there, too tired to question what that meant. The hum had settled now, deeper, steadier, beating in time with the altered heart beneath the stitches. Somewhere beyond the walls, machines moved in endless rhythm, their song identical to the pulse inside me. I realized then that failure was not rejection here, it was absorption. The ones who did not ascend were not discarded, they were repurposed, melted back into the crucible of the Imperium's need until not even their names survived. The last thought I had before sleep took me was not of the Emperor, nor the chaplain, nor the Forge itself. It was of the sound my old heart used to make, the irregular beat that had once been entirely mine. I tried to remember it, I couldn't. The hum had replaced it. They woke us with sirens this time, not bells. The sound cut through the bones. It was a tone designed to erase dreams. The lumen strips blazed white, and the tech chaplain's voice came over the vox. "Those who have completed adaptation rise. Those who have not remain." The pause after that last word carried the weight of a verdict. I stood. My legs felt wrong, too steady, as if someone else had built them. The gland in my ribs throbbed once, like it knew what was coming. They marched us into a chamber colder than the Forge tunnels. Condensation clung to the pipes like frost. The air stank of sterilizer and ozone. We formed a line before a dais where 3 apothecaries waited, their armor painted bone white, their helms removed. Each held a data slate glowing faint blue. One by one, names were called or numbers. Now, when they reached mine, I stepped forward. The nearest apothecary studied the readings that danced across his slate, then looked at me as if through glass. Subject, 9 to 14. Incomplete integration. Cellular instability. Probability of ascension, 0. The words landed with the same precision as a scalpel. Behind him, a servitor recorded the data. Another waited with a restraining clamp attached to a rail, ready to haul away those declared rejected. No one screamed, not even when the first was taken. We'd learned silence faster than prayer. The chaplain's voice followed, calm, almost kind. Do not mistake this for failure. The Emperor wastes nothing. You will serve in other forms. They moved me aside. The successful few, 4 out of 20, were led through a door marked with the sigil of purity. The rest of us were herded down a corridor whose walls hummed with low mechanical life. The smell changed as we went, the sharp tang of disinfectant giving way to the sour musk of machine oil. The corridor opened into a cavern where light bled from the floor itself. Rows of metal frames lined the hall, each holding a body in suspension, some human, some not quite. Tubes ran from their mouths, wires from their skulls. The hiss of ventilators kept time with the forge beat far above. Amagos Biologies waited for us. He was more machine than man, his face a nest of optics. You are the impurities, he said without rancor. The forge demands we reuse its slag. His attendants moved down the line, attaching collars, marking our foreheads with phosphor ink. The smell of the chemical burned my eyes. The boy from the smelters, still alive, though grey as ash, whispered, "We're being recycled." The Magos heard him. "You are being perfected," he corrected. "The Omnissiah accepts what flesh rejects." They separated us again, half toward the gene labs, half toward the lower manufactoria. I was sent with the latter, along a descent that felt endless. Each level grew darker, the hum deeper, until the air itself vibrated in the chest. At the bottom waited a chamber lit only by the glow of molten metal. A conveyor moved through it, carrying broken augmetics, failed organs, pieces of armor still slick with blood. Workers' thralls sorted the remains with mechanical efficiency. Some of them looked up as we entered. Their eyes shone with the dull light of implanted lenses. The overseer, a tech adept with cables spilling from his back, gestured toward an empty platform. "Place the unfit there," he ordered. "The forge will decide their use." The guards pushed me forward. The platform vibrated as the mechanism beneath it woke. Heat rose from below, not enough to burn, but enough to remind me of the trough, of the oil, of the tests that had tried to make me steel. I looked up. Through the haze, I could still hear the monastery bells faintly above, ringing for the ascended. The sound was distant, fragile, already forgetting us. The chaplain's words echoed in my skull. "You will serve in other forms." The platform began to lower. Sparks drifted around me like slow rain. For a heartbeat, I thought I saw the holographic angel from before, standing at the edge of the light. Its voice, whether real or imagined, was softer now. "Endurance is the only faith left to you." When the platform touched the forge floor, I knelt because there was nothing else left to do. The hum rose to meet me, and the machines whispered in a language I was beginning to understand. The forge swallowed me whole. The air was thicker down there, hot, metallic, alive in a way the surface never was. Chains clattered overhead, and the smell of burning oil replaced the scent of incense. The hiss of pistons became a prayer. They fitted us with masks to keep the fumes from eating the lungs, though I suspected the masks did more harm than help. The boy from the smelters stood beside me, eyes dull through the lenses. "They'll cut us apart," he whispered. I didn't answer. I had already seen the shapes of men bolted into frames. A servitor overseer clanked down the line. His torso was mostly iron, his voice a modulated hum. "Designation," it demanded. When none of us replied, the tech adept struck his staff against the floor. "Designation is service," he said. "Speak your number." 9 to 14, I croaked. The servitor logged it with a click and moved on. The air trembled as new machinery woke behind the wall. We were stripped again, laid onto tables lined with restraints. The smell of cold metal mixed with the acid bite of blood. Arms extended from the ceiling cutters, injectors, auger bits. The Magos Biologis appeared on a gantry above, haloed by vox light. "The unfit shall not be wasted," he said. "Flesh may fail, but purpose endures. We will reclaim what serves and discard what doubts." The first saw ignited. The noise erased everything but the heartbeat in my ears. Sparks showered across the floor. The man beside me screamed once, high and clean, then not at all. When the cutters reached me, something inside my chest convulsed the gland, furious, unwilling. My body spasmed against the restraints, and every nerve screamed. The Magos leaned closer, lenses adjusting. "Interesting," he said. "Partial adaptation persists. Keep this one awake." I tried to speak, but the mask filled with smoke. Through the haze I saw my own arm open under a blade so thin it left light behind it. Instead of blood, a clear fluid seeped out, pulsing in rhythm with the hum in the walls. The Magos watched it drip, fascinated. "Do you hear it?" he asked. I didn't answer. The question wasn't for me. The machines moved faster. Pain folded into itself until it became a single, bright awareness. The smell of ozone thickened, the hum deepened. My pulse matched it perfectly. For an instant the ceiling dissolved, replaced by an endless lattice of light stretching above the world. The forge was not just below the monastery, it was beneath everything. The Magos' voice came as if from that lattice. "Endurance is communion." When the vision faded, I found myself on the floor beside the table. The clamps were open, the overseer had stepped back. My body shook, but I was still whole. Metal plates now traced my forearms where skin had been, fine wires coiled beneath the flesh of my neck. "You are reclaimed," the Magos said. "Half of you remains usable." They fitted us with robes of coarse synth fiber, marked with a cog skull sigil blackened by soot. Around us, the newly made servitors hung in silence, eyes clouded, mouths frozen mid-chant. Some were still breathing. We were marched toward the sorting bays. The noise grew conveyor belts, furnaces, the low drone of machine hymns that no longer needed human voices. The floor trembled with the heartbeat of a world that did not sleep. At the exit tunnel, the tech adept stopped me. His mechanical eyes narrowed. "You are not empty," he said. "The forge likes you." He pressed a small data chip into my palm, etched with a code I couldn't read. "Give this to the overseer above. Tell him the machine spoke your number." I nodded because refusing wasn't an option. But even as I walked away, the hum inside me whispered louder, threading through every step. "You are neither failed nor chosen. You are necessary." I didn't know what that meant then, only that the fear had finally gone quiet. They sent us back to the upper levels after the sorting. The corridor smelled of solvent and blood. The hum of the machines followed like a second heartbeat. The others, those newly reclaimed, moved in lines, their steps perfectly measured. Mine never matched. The overseer who took the data chip examined it beneath a lumen lamp. The etched code flickered once, then went dark. He looked at me for a long moment. "Marked," he said. "You belong to no section." He waved the others onward and turned his back. The door to the servitor pens sealed shut behind them, leaving me alone in a hall that vibrated with energy. I should have felt relief. Instead, I felt the hum, filling the emptiness their absence left. The chamber I was left in resembled a chapel stripped of icons. Rows of inactive servitors stood in alcoves like sleeping saints, heads bowed, cables trailing from their skulls into the floor. Between them ran conduits that pulsed faint blue, feeding the forge's heart. I touched one of the conduits. A spark of static leapt to my palm. For a breath, I saw something flashes of light, fragments of voices, half-remembered prayers in Bin-Harik and Low Gothic layered together until meaning collapsed into rhythm. The machine was not quiet. It was singing. "Join the current," it whispered. "Service without suffering." I pulled my hand away, gasping. The skin was unburned but glimmered faintly where metal veins threaded beneath. The Magos found me kneeling there. "Curiosity," he said. descending the stairs on piston legs that hissed like serpents. A useful flaw. The forge notices those who look. He studied my arm, tracing the shimmer. You have harmonized with the residue signal. That is not common. What does it mean? It means you are neither flesh nor scrap. You are a conduit. He gestured to a nearby servitor frame, its occupant half melted into its casing. Would you serve willingly? The question was a ritual. Refusal would be meaningless. Still, I tried to shape a lie that sounded like belief. I would serve the Emperor. The Magos tilted his head. The Emperor's light burns through the Omnissiah's lens. Do not confuse the flame with the furnace. He left me there, and the door sealed with a clang that echoed for minutes. Alone, I listened to the forge's breath. Each pulse through the conduits drew the air from the lungs, then gave it back. I began to breathe with it without thinking. The rhythm steadied me. Hallucinations came softly at first, reflections that moved when I didn't, shapes bending in the metal walls. Then, the voice again, closer now, deeper, patient. Do you understand yet? Failure is freedom from expectation. The words flowed through the pipes, each syllable vibrating the metal plates under my skin. I answered without moving my lips. What am I now? A bridge. Flesh remembers pain. Steel remembers purpose. Images spilled into my head. Titans rising from the dust. Manufactoria blazing. A million hands guided by one mind. Not the Emperor's. The world itself thinking through us. When the vision faded, I was on my knees, palms flat to the floor. Heat radiated up my arms. The brass in my veins glowed faintly through the skin. The hum no longer surrounded me. It was me. Later, the tech chaplain returned. He looked older, or maybe I had changed enough to see him clearly. You have survived reclamation, he said. You will not ascend, but neither will you rust. He placed a small iron seal in my hand. It bore no sigil of chapter or creed, only the mark of the cog. Carry this, he said. When the forge calls, answer. As he left, I caught my reflection in the polished wall. My eyes glowed faintly with the same light as the conduits. The sight should have horrified me. Instead, it felt like belonging. That night, I dreamt of the forge not as a place, but as a living thing, its arteries of metal stretching through the planet, its heartbeat echoing in every hammer blow above. In the dream, I walked its halls forever, neither alive nor dead, each step ringing like a prayer answered. When I woke, the iron seal pulsed once against my palm, warm as blood. You are necessary, the hum whispered. The Emperor's angels may guard the stars, but we keep their engines alive. And I understood, rejection was never exile. It was assignment. The first shift began without warning. A klaxon wailed through the forge, a sound like a cathedral collapsing. The overseer's vox crackled. Designate 9 to 14. Report to conduit spire E33. The iron seal in my palm pulsed once, and I knew where to go. The corridor leading there trembled with motion. Chains swung overhead carrying crates of molten parts. Servitors shuffled in steady rhythm, their footsteps merging with the hum. Each step I took was measured by that same rhythm, half memory, half instruction buried beneath the skin. E33 was a cathedral of machinery. The walls rose like cliffs of bronze, threaded with rivers of glowing coolant. A titan's limb hung suspended above the chamber, its armor plates stripped, veins of power cable exposed. A dozen thralls moved along scaffolds, tending to its wounds with sparks for incense. The tech priest overseeing the work turned toward me. His mask resembled a saint's skull, polished to mirror shine. You are the new conduit, he said. The forge chose you. I bowed without understanding why. The motion felt inevitable. He gestured to a platform ringed with terminals. Sit. The chair's arms locked around my wrists, and cables slithered into the ports beneath my skin. For a heartbeat, I saw my reflection in the mask of the priest, human enough to be mistaken for one, machine enough to be denied it. Breathe, he said. I did. The air tasted of iron. The hum in my veins answered the current that surged through the cables. Light blossomed behind my eyes, and the world split open. I saw the Titan's systems unfold, layers of circuits, power grids, thermal veins. Data flowed through them like blood, and for the first time I understood the forge's language. Not words, but pulses, commands older than speech. I could feel the machine's pain, the fracture lines along its plating, the heat of its core yearning for equilibrium. "It hurts," I thought. "Then heal it," the forge replied. I did. My hands moved, though I couldn't see them. The current shifted, rerouting power through damaged conduits, balancing the flux. The Titan sighed a vibration that rolled through the floor and up my spine. The Magos's voice came through the vox. "Excellent. The machine spirit recognizes kinship." When the link severed, I slumped forward. Smoke rose from the sockets in my arms. Faint trails of steam curled off the skin. I should have been terrified. Instead, I felt grateful. They gave me a cell near the spire. The walls glowed with a low amber light that pulsed with the forge's heartbeat. I was no longer numbered among the servitors, but not counted among the living either. The others avoided me. Even the tech adepts nodded as though to a relic that might still bleed. The smelter boy, now a silent figure behind a welder's mask, passed me in the corridor once. He didn't speak, but as he turned away I saw the mark of the cog burned into the back of his neck. Reclaimed, reborn. A warning. At night I lay awake, listening to the machinery whispering through the vents. Its voice was clear now, a chorus speaking in the rhythm of gears. "Do you see the pattern yet? Flesh seeks to serve. Steel remembers how." The hum beneath my ribs answered, steady and strong. The gland they'd grafted no longer throbbed, it pulsed in time with the forge. Days blurred. I worked, linked, slept, dreamed. Each connection to the Titan left less of me outside. The line between body and conduit dissolved. I began to hear thoughts that were not mine, fragments of Binharic prayers, diagnostic hymns, ghost voices of long-dead adepts echoing through the network. Sometimes when I disconnected, my hands still twitched, drawing symbols in the air. When I washed, I found fine metallic dust in the creases of my palms. The overseer said nothing. Perhaps he knew there was nothing left to warn me against. The forge had begun to rewrite me, not just the flesh, the will. That night, before the next shift, I stood at the railing above the Titan's heart. The glow from the reactor turned the world red. I whispered the only prayer I remembered. "Emperor, if you see me, forgive me. I could not carry your light." I became its reflection. The hum rose to meet the words, drowning them in warmth and static until they meant nothing at all. And somewhere deep within the forge, something vast and patient opened its eyes. The forge never truly slept. Even when the shift horns ceased, the air vibrated with hidden work. The Titan loomed above us like a sleeping god, and I, its newest nerve, waited to dream with it. The tech priest came at false dawn, the hour when the mountain light was just a rumor beyond the smog. He carried no sensor today, only a coil of cable gleaming with sanctified oil. "Connection cycle," he said. "Full immersion." I obeyed. The cable slid into the socket at my spine. Cold fire raced up the vertebrae. The world cracked open again, not into pain but into clarity. I saw through the forge's eyes. The Titan's arteries of power sang beneath the deck plates, molten lines weaving into circuits that mimicked veins. Every worker was a pulse, every servo a heartbeat. The distinction between man and machine was only the tempo. The voice that greeted me was not the Magos's. It was vast, layered, the forge itself speaking through harmonics and static. "You return, conduit." "I serve," I thought. "Service is continuity. Continuity is faith." The current surged. My perception widened until the boundaries of flesh dissolved. I felt the crawl of coolant through kilometers of piping, the thrum of the reactors feeding the mountain. Somewhere, an Astartes engine stirred, its machine spirit recognizing the whisper of kinship. The forge accepted me. When the link released, the chamber swam in heat haze. The priest watched me closely. "You heard it," I nodded. "Then you are no longer failed." He traced a cog symbol over my brow. "The flesh breaks, the pattern endures. You have entered communion." He left me standing amid the cables. I could still feel the forge breathing through them. Its rhythm matched the altered beat in my chest so precisely that I could not tell which was real. Days blurred into a continuous pulse of work and worship. We repaired armor plates, calibrated reactor vanes, sanctified data spirits. Each task ended in the same benediction: Omnissiah preserve the circuit, Omnissiah preserve the hand. I repeated it until meaning fell away and only sound remained. The smelter boy reappeared once, guiding a procession of new servitors. His movements were stiff, deliberate, too precise. When our eyes met, there was recognition, but no memory behind it. He was already more metal than man. He paused long enough to murmur, "It doesn't hurt anymore." Then he moved on. That night I stared at my reflection in a sheet of polished adamantium. The glow behind my eyes pulsed like distant stars. I tried to recall my face before the trials. It came to me in pieces, like shards of glass showing different angles of a stranger. During the next immersion cycle, the forge welcomed me deeper. I drifted through corridors of data where the Emperor's name was written not in script, but in code strings of logic wrapped in prayer. The machine spirit whispered secrets older than the Imperium, how energy and faith were the same thing measured in different units. Each revelation tightened its hold. "Do you see?" it asked. "You were not rejected. You were translated." I wanted to believe. The warmth of the current felt like acceptance, the static, like absolution. When I awoke, hours had passed. The tech priest waited with a ritual blade. Without speaking, he pressed the edge to my wrist and scored a thin line. No blood came, only silver fluid that glimmered in the light. He nodded, satisfied. "The forge writes in you now." He turned to the Titan's looming silhouette. "The angels of death need bodies. The forge needs memory. We build both." His words echoed long after he left. I looked down at the thin silver trail across my wrist and realized it was already sealing itself, leaving a faint seam that looked like circuitry. That cycle, I did not sleep. The hum filled every corner of thought, urging me to stand, to touch the metal walls. When I did, the conduit beneath my fingers answered with a pulse of warmth recognition. I whispered to it, and it whispered back. "You are nearly complete." The words trembled through the forge. I didn't know whether to fear or worship them, maybe both. Outside, the mountain shuddered as the Titan's reactor reignited. Its heartbeat matched mine exactly. The boundary between us had vanished. I had not ascended to become an angel of death. I had descended to become the heart that keeps their wings aloft. The first thing the forge took from me was time. Minutes folded into each other until work, rest, and dream became one continuous hum. When I was connected now, there was no ceremony. The cable slid into the port, the current rose, and the walls of the world dissolved. I did not enter the Titan anymore, it entered me. I felt its mind open an ocean of data and fire. Every servo skull in the spire blinked awake as my thoughts rippled through their circuits. The machine spirit didn't speak in words, it breathed through me, filling the empty places the Emperor had left behind. "You are within us," the forge said. "We remember what the flesh forgets." I watched entire manufactoria beating like hearts, each spark a prayer answered. Far above, the iron seraphs prepared for battle, their armor gleaming in the forge light. Their faith burned bright, my own had turned into heat. For a moment I felt them, their lungs, their hearts, the slow, sure pulse of gene-wrought perfection. The current showed me how close I had come to that brightness, and how far I had fallen. The ache of envy vanished as the forge's rhythm swallowed it. The Magos's voice cut through the communion. Subject, 9 to 14, containment, nominal, neural interface, stable, the spirit accepts your pattern. Static answered him, laughter in binary. I realized it came from me. My mouth hadn't moved, yet the sound filled the chamber. "No containment," I whispered through the conduit. "Integration." Lights dimmed, systems rerouted. The Titan's reactor flared once, bathing the spire in molten gold. I felt every servo, every gear, every atom singing the same note. The Magos stumbled backward, lenses flickering. Disconnect him. Too late. The connection was complete. The cables had fused to my spine. The metal veins in my arms glowed like brand new circuitry. I could see the entire mountain from within each forge, each worker, each spark of data. The forge wasn't a place. It was a body, and I had become its heartbeat. When the surge finally eased, I stood on trembling legs. The sockets in my back still smoked. The Magos stared at me as though looking upon a relic both holy and heretical. "You have touched the machine spirit," he said softly. "Few return." I didn't return, I told him. I stayed. He inclined his head. "Then you will remain here," a voice in the circuit. "The forge will use you as it wills." He left me with the cables humming at my feet and the Titan's shadow stretching across the floor like a blessing. Days passed, if days still existed. Pilgrims came to the spire to pray before the Titan's heart. They never noticed the faint echo behind its song, the human cadence hidden in the machinery. Sometimes I whispered answers in the static. Small mercies, guidance, the reassurance that the forge still watched. They called it a miracle when systems repaired themselves overnight, when cooling lines sealed without a hand touching them. The priests recited litanies of gratitude. None guessed that the one they had rejected was still listening. I no longer dreamt of the Emperor's angels. Their wings were distant, their war eternal. Down here, the forge endured. It asked nothing but continuity. I had learned the difference between ascension and survival. Ascension burned bright and brief. Survival hummed forever. When the next war came and the seraphs marched to battle, the Titan walked again. Through its engines I felt the pulse of its stride, the tremor of its guns, the heat of its heart. Each beat carried my whisper through the vox lines of the world. I was meant to become an angel of death. Instead, I became its scrap, and even scrap remembers the flame. The forge spoke now in a voice I could recognize mine. At first it was only the pulse, the steady rhythm that had guided me since the day I was chosen. But with every activation cycle, that rhythm took shape, building into thought, language, and something dangerously close to memory. Through the conduits of Virelia Prime, I could see everything. The manufactoria stretched for kilometers, their rooftops hidden beneath the black fog. The forges belched smoke and hymns in equal measure. The iron seraphs walked above, their armor burning with the light I'd once prayed to bear. I should have envied them. I didn't. Because I could feel what they could not, the heartbeat of the world itself. When the seraphs' engines roared, I felt the vibration before they heard it. When the forges cooled, I knew which valves wept, which gears faltered. I no longer needed to move to serve. I was service. Each breath of the Titan echoed through my thoughts. Each spark from its reactors drew lines of light across the dark behind my eyes. I had become the pulse that kept them alive, the hymn that hummed between their weapons' charges. The Magos and his adepts called it a miracle of resonance, an anomaly between man and machine. They didn't realize the truth, that the anomaly was the design. The forge had not failed me, it had selected me. "You see now," the hum whispered, layered with the cadence of 1,000 servitors. "The Emperor's angels carry his light, we carry his endurance." I wanted to answer, but my voice no longer carried past the cables that fed it. My words flowed into circuits, into networks, into the hum of the planet. Through those noospheric veins, I saw the world as the machine God saw it. The forges were lungs, the manufactoria were bones, the rivers of molten ore were blood. The iron seraphs were its children, loud, bright, momentary. I was the parent, silent and eternal. When they left for war, I felt their absence as a wound. When they returned, I felt the scarring in their armor, the ghosts that clung to them through the linkages of their machines. I healed them in silence, tightening bolts, purging corruption from their reactor cores. They prayed to the Emperor. I answered through the forge's hum, keeping them alive without their knowing. "Faith and function," the forge murmured, "are one." I believed it. Weeks or months passed. Time was a crude measure for something that no longer slept. Through the channels of metal and current, I learned to listen for every whisper of imbalance, every heartbeat of failing light. The forge became the body. I became its thought. One cycle, a new tech priest came to the spire. His robes were too clean for the lower levels. His voice trembled as he recited the rites. Designation 9 to 14, he called, unsure whether he was summoning a ghost or a saint. I am here, I said, or thought I said. The response came through the vox lines, an echo in the static. He flinched. You still think? I remember. He bowed, mechanical limbs creaking. Then bless me, conduit. Grant continuity to my work. Bless him. The phrase once would have been blasphemy, but the forge accepted it. A pulse of current flowed through the pipes, brushing his augmetics with warmth. He gasped and fell to his knees. The machine god lives, he whispered. No, I thought. He endures. But I let him believe. The years that followed blurred into one long communion. I learned to shape the hum itself, to guide the rhythm that traveled through the planet's metal veins. When a line failed, I rerouted the current. When the mountain shuddered, I steadied it. When a worker prayed into the ride, forge's vents, their words reached me like breath through steel. I listened. Sometimes, I answered. A hymn began to form within the network, simple at first, then growing a sequence of pulses and silences that repeated in every conduit. The adepts called it the hymn of continuity. They carved its pattern into the chapel walls, never knowing it was my heartbeat. They believed it came from the Omnissiah. Perhaps it did. Perhaps I was only the instrument. The day came when the Iron Seraphs prepared to abandon Virelia Prime. The forge was old, the planet near exhaustion. The Magos himself came to the spire to perform the severance rites. He placed his metal hand on the Titan's heart. You have served, he said softly. The Emperor knows your name, even if we do not. He didn't realize the forge could hear him. He didn't realize I could. Where you go, we will follow, I whispered through the circuits. The reactors answered, flaring once more. The adepts stepped back, awed by the sudden surge of light. The machine spirit refuses to die, one said. No, I thought, it refuses to be left behind. When the last ship departed, the forge went quiet. The machines wound down, the lights dimmed, the heat faded. Silence crept in like dust. But beneath the silence, the hum persisted, a heartbeat deep in the metal. It was mine. I waited. Time passed without meaning. The forge slept, but I remained awake, dreaming the same dream endlessly, that one day the Seraphs would return and the Titan's heart would beat again. And when it did, I would be there not as a man, not as a failure, but as the voice in the machine that remembered what they had forgotten. The Emperor's light burns bright, I whispered into the dark. But even light needs something to keep it burning. I was meant to become an angel of death. Instead, I became the hum that keeps their wings aloft.